So what I'm going to do, I'm going to mute you all, especially you, Sheila.
Thank you.
Right, you've gone now, you've gone, and it's just me. This is Benny, and he's a rather elderly, well, bedraggled, possibly past his best cat, who's very, very much loved, Hannah's cat. And he's just found a new lease of life because they've just moved into a house with a garden, and he's been in a flat for a long time, Benny has, but he's now managed to get out and about. And so he's enjoying this new lease of life in the garden. And this was a picture I took the other week. But I thought it's nice because you can kind of see underneath this all slightly tatty fur, you can see his shapes. You can see his slightly arthritic hip, and you can see his rib cage and his haunches and his slightly saggy knees. So I thought he'll make a lovely picture. And so I thought we'd have a bash, and we'll paint him in an appropriate manner. We'll paint him loose and bedraggled and slightly rough around the edges. So, wonderful. If I do this, let's make a start. Let's see if I can find Benny on here. Here he is. In the waiting room. Go. Right. So grab your sketchbooks and let's have a look. By the way, if you want to ask me any questions while I'm in the middle of this, just unmute yourselves and chirp up. I'll be here listening. So, pencil. As I say, I'm going to do this really nice and loosely. So I've just got my old propelling pencil here, which is lovely because I like these because you don't have to sharpen them. You just keep, it's the lead that keeps on giving, just keeps on coming. And let's flesh out Benny. A little quick, let's just get his form in. Get those little bandy legs in at the back. This is great because you can be as relaxed about it as you like. You can't really go longer, you know. He's got a very forgiving shape, Benny has. So I'm just going around and picking out little bits. And look at the quality of this line. I'm doing it really wobbly, and already it's starting to feel like a cat of a certain age. You know, we might even veer into the realms of caricature here, but that's okay. Let's kind of speculate where his head is there. Just a nice little vortex of lines. And then, as usual, I'm just feeling my way here. I'm going in with a few loose lines, and then I'm just gradually firming them up. See, this back isn't just a straight line. It's a bit of it's a journey down Benny's spine. Look, we've got valleys and peaks and troughs and ridges. So when you've got that basic line in, take a trip down Benny's spine and just work out where it's going. Now, you know, you can see this old pelvis starting to make itself shown down there. Okay, and then I'm cross-referencing. I'm just thinking, okay, I've come down from these haunches down there, and his legs are here. I can see already that leg's a little bit too far forward, so I can tweak that a little bit. But when you kind of throw caution to the wind and you say to yourself, you know, this actually isn't, I actually don't want this to be perfect. It takes the pressure off, and you know, you can kind of start to enjoy yourself. That's a nice little line down there, that thigh. And you can see his kind of doddery leg down here. The doddery leg over here is splayed back legs, bless him. Okay, yeah, that's not far off. It's not far off at all. Little What is? Ooh, hang on. Where's he going? Benny. Let's get that heel down. That's good. That's a very kind of aging cat feature, isn't there? That sagging little. Is that a knee? That's not a knee. That's a. Is that a heel? I don't know. Don't really know my cat anatomy. Get the tail in. And of course, cat's fur, when they get to this age, it starts to look a bit tangled because, you know, bless him, he can't lick his, can't clean himself like he used to, I guess. Okay, that's okay. Let's look at this head. That comes around there like that. Probably gone a bit high there. Little nick out of his ear. Remnants of a little bit of a kerfuffle in the past. Now his face, I'm just trying to structure his face so everything falls into the right place. So I'm just going to put a little line down the middle like that. And then a line for his eyes like that. And it just means, you know, hopefully things will just fall into the right place. So if we get his nose, pop a nose there, and, you know, these nose and two eyes make a triangle that kind of go like that. And just try and get those eyes in the right place. There you go, Benny. And then coming down there, you've got that very distinctive cat mouth like that. And his chin's lost and buried in the folds of whatever you down there. Okay, is that looking about right? I think I've been a little bit mean on his girth. I'm going to give him a bit more of a tummy down there. It's made him look a bit scrawny. But as I say, you know, we don't mind if we veer into the caricature, the realms of caricature here, because we're being loose. I don't particularly want to exaggerate stuff that isn't there. I'm just, you know, I'm just being very loose and relaxed about it. Okay. Yeah. Actually, no, this needs a bit of work. That is, you know, this is the time. Look at that and look at that. And you know, look between the two and you can see that this ear is actually not in the right place. If you look where that ear goes up there, that ear is kind of right at the, goes above his eye. And I'm right off pieced here. This ear needs to come over here. So this is the time to change it before you start painting, obviously. You know, it's nicer to try and, it's easier to make amends at this stage than it is later on. And, you know, these little remnants of mistakes, they're all part of the process. They're all, you know, that's what makes it different to a photograph. You know, a photograph is just a record of a, you know, photograph's just, what is it, a 500th of a second or something. It's bang and it's there. But this isn't a 500th of a second. This is half an hour. I'm going to bring his back up a little bit as well. I think I've made him, looks a bit kitten-like. So let's give him a bit more upper body strength there. Okay. All right, Benny, that's your lot. I'm going to make a little bit of an effort on these eyes now. Let's have a little closer look at what's going on here. As usual, the eyes, the windows of the soul, they're very important to get right. So it's worth just spending a bit of time on these shapes, the shapes. Because if you look at them, they're not just circles. Spend a bit of time getting this shape right. They're kind of almond shaped and they're tilted up at an angle. There's an angle, they're kind of like that. Yeah. So the edge of that eye is there, and the inside of the eye is kind of there. And they carry on going up there like that. There it goes. And then, I don't know if this is characteristic of it, he has actually got a kind of eyelids. You can see the top edge of that eye goes over the bottom edge there. It comes over like that and over like that. And then around here, there's kind of membranes and tissues inside the eye socket. It's not just a hole, so it's worth just having a look. And in here, there's a rim, and then there's almost like a bottom eyelid there. And then there's an eyelid, and you can see the bits that move the eyeball. It's worth spending a little while just, having a close look. There's lots of stuff going on inside Benny's eyes. And then, of course, we want to maintain a highlight. So I want a nice, bright highlight. So I'm just going to mark those in there. The lights, well, it's kind of very soft and overhead, but there seems to be a break in the sky or the trees over here, because you can see that in his eyes there. You see there's a little highlight over this side as well. There's sky all round, obviously. And then get his pupils in and try and get these in the right place so that because he's looking at us here. So you want to try and have him looking at us in the picture too. Don't go too heavy on these things. Don't put too big a pupil, a black pupil in. And of course, these eyes obey the same principle. I don't know which of you did the eye class with me, but the top eyelid is casting a shadow onto the iris. So there's a little bit of a cast shadow on the top of each of these eyes like this, which will come in and we'll paint. But you seasoned veterans will know how to tackle that. Right, I reckon that's enough. I'm going to get cracking with that. Let's have a look. Are you happy with that, Benny? Are you pleased with that? Yeah. I think that mouth probably. I think I've done him a few favours with this drawing. Actually, I think I've knocked a few years off him. We'll soon sort that out with the paint. Right, now get your paints out. I'm using this old tin of paints here because it's got a nice Payne's grey in it. And I know from experience that this Payne's grey granulates and it separates into different colours. It's made up of different pigments. So there's a bit of blue in it, and there's a bit of red in it. But when you douse it with water and when you really throw a lot of liquid at it, those granules, those pigment granules separate, and it gives you some really nice effects. So I'm going to use this because it's a nice old Payne's grey. However, there's not a lot of colour in this. Grab yourself your black paint, but activate all your paints because I want to put some more colours in here. There's bits of yellow in his ears, and there's bits of blue, and there's bits of purple. and blue in his coat. And it's nice to enhance those. You know, you don't want to just do a plain black mask. Give it a little bit of interest. First thing I'm going to do though are his eyes, because I'm going to get them in and I'm going to get them dried off, and they're a kind of yellow with a speck of green in them. They're lovely. So I've got in my lemon yellow. I've spritzed my paints with water. So these are all lovely and gloopy and moist now, so that I literally just need to touch into here and I can paint with it. And it's not a wash, it's just the stuff in here isn't a wash. This is really strong pigment, and I'm starting to appreciate this more and more. So I'm carefully going to paint in these eyes first, because I want these to dry off. I'm not going to paint, obviously I'm not going to paint his highlights. They stay white. So I'm going to get a bit of yellow in, and then I'm coming into this lime green that I've got here. Actually, my brush is a bit wet. Let's get some green in. And I'm painting this quite dry. I'm not flooding the paper with water because I want this to dry. I want this to dry because I'm coming in with, I'll do. So, not a lot of water on there, just coloured it, just getting it ready to go. And the reason I've kept that dry is because I'm going to flood this now. This is going to really hammer the sketchbook, but you know what? There's nothing that looks nicer than a well-worn, beaten up, taken to the cleaner's sketchbook. So what I'm doing now, I've got my black already wet there. Actually, what I will do is I'll just make, let me just clean that out a bit. Just going to make a little puddle of my Payne's grey. While that's drying, just a bit of a puddle like that there. See? Beautiful colour. It's very kind of charcoaly. So that is a Payne's grey wash. But what I'm going to be doing is most of the time I'm going to be coming in and I'm going to be going straight into this pan of Payne's grey and painting straight onto the page. But this is an intermediate grey, this is, which I'm using because, you know, we've still got to describe Benny's form here. We've still got to show that the light's hitting there and the shadows under there, and we still want to make him three-dimensional. We just don't want him to be a flat shape. So with clean water, I am going to paint in and around Benny, because I'm going to let this paint ooze over the edges of my pencil line. So I am putting down plenty of water, and I'm going beyond his outline, which is important because I don't want the paint to stop at the outline. I want it to bleed out. And I want to, you know, I want to give the impression of this, I want to give the impression of fur. So I'm putting plenty of paint, sorry, not plenty of paint, plenty of water all over the figure of Benny. Crazy amount of water. It's puddling. It's making the paper buckle. It's great. It's lovely. Don't be precious about your sketchbooks. Make it suffer. You know, make it work for its living. Now, I've got to be careful around the eyes. I don't want to go and touch these eyes with this brush of water. Otherwise, that's going to tease that yellow and green out. So I'm being a little bit careful around here, and I'm giving those eyes a bit of space. I'm painting around the eyes like that. I don't want to catch that yellow paint with my wet brush. Otherwise that yellow paint will start to migrate out into the wet areas. Okay. So carefully around there. Okay. I'm almost just leaving where I've drawn the pencil outline as a border, a little barrier. Okay. So now this is lovely and wet. Give this another little refresher down here. Plenty of water. So, yeah, I don't know if you see how wet that is? Okay, and now I'm going to start throwing in this Payne's grey mix. Well, I'm going to go in with a gentle wash first. And that, because this is wet and that's a wash, the end result is going to be quite a pale colour. You know, that's a wash, it's dilute colour. That's wet, that's going to dilute it even more. So when I come in and I start to paint like this, it's going to dilute it even more. So I'm getting a really nice pale grey. And look at that, isn't that? It looks already, it's very, very Benny. Now I'm going to carry on. I'm just going to fill in all the way around. Because this is a wash and I'm adding it to a wet surface, I'm adding more water and it's starting to run into the spine and it's starting to create puddles here and there. But it's also blooming out. It's also starting to make some very, very nice edges. Look at the edge across there. It's absolutely perfect. Of course, golden rule number one, always make enough paint, which I didn't, so quickly make up a bit more. It's not crucial on this one. Benny doesn't mind because he's really relaxed about it. So as you can see, this is turning into a kind of very pale wash. And I'm bringing it, I don't want it to go in the eyes. I just want to get it, I just want to get that tone in everywhere. Because there's no real white on Benny, apart from his whiskers, which I'm going to put in later on when he's dry with my dip pen and white ink. You remember we discovered that last week on the drawing of the glass. So carefully going around there. His eyes should be quite dry now. So now that's got, I've got a puddle of water down the center there. I kind of don't want it to sit there. That will go through all to my other pages. So I'm going to dry my brush off. And if you've got a good brush, that brush will suck it up. Can that go? In a couple of passes, that has hoovered up all that excess moisture down there. And here too, I've got a couple of puddles here. Just suck it up with the brush. You see the blue and the brown separating a little bit here. Now, this is all a lovely, lovely kind of wet surface to play with. And now I'm going to come back into here, look straight into my pan. And I can start to put in the darker areas. And because we're painting wet in wet, this is still going to carry on bleeding around. But it's going to allow me to put in the areas of shadow. So, for example, there's a shadow, you know, there's a line of darkness goes up there. And right down there underneath his tail, just gently. I can define that back paw there is behind his front thigh. And it's slightly dark, so I can just darken his back paw down in there. Although that is now going to bleed into there, so I should have waited a little bit for that to dry off a bit, perhaps. Now, these kind of lovely old arthritic hips, it dips into there. So let's make some shadow in there. And I'm just dabbing onto this wet surface and letting the paint do the work. Now I can try and introduce a few directional marks to suggest fur. I can, now where is the light really is catching on the top like that, I can pick off a bit of that grey wash by just dabbing it a bit like so. And here maybe. I'm playing now. I'm just trying off a few little different strokes. I know my class, we're going to even have a spat in here. Put a few spats on. Just liven it up. Now carrying on underneath, let's get some shadow in his tummy and that back leg down there. But you can see there's just, I don't know if you can see there's a highlight just on the back of his, behind his front elbow where the light's catching it. So I've got a light area here I'm going to keep light, but then I want to darken all this down. I'm actually, see there, where I wanted to put his back foot in there, that's, as I said, that's bled into there. So that's not describing the overlap of that front leg over the back leg very clearly. I should have waited for that to dry, and I'll do that here. But I can maybe just salvage that by just lifting that bit off there like that. I should really crack on it before this starts to dry. I want to start to get some form in his face. So what have you got? Let's have a look at this face. He's got a kind of brow, and the dark areas come down the side of his nose like that. And then this brow comes around, and he's actually got eyelids which are lighter. So let's try and reveal those. Let's try and let those eyelids be. And then he's got like a little crest of darkness there. That kind of thing. His ears are quite dark. And they've got a rim which goes around there like that. And they come down there like that. That's drying off now. You see, I'm starting to get hard edges around here. So I'm going to come in here. I'm also going to put a bit of colour into this as well. Let's see what would be nice. There's got a little bit of orange in there. I can put it in, I can take it out. Get those ears darkened down a bit. Get a bit of water in there as well to start making that do some interesting thing. I'm splatting this with clean water as well because that's going to make little blooms and create texture and interest. Okay, so I've got to introduce much more black down here, getting blacked up. His face is still a bit on the pale side. His nose needs a bit more tone. Bit of definition in those cheekbones would be good. Right, and of course, I always take out some paint. So I'm just looking at this jawline down here. I've lost it here. So I'm with with a wet, clean brush, slightly damp. I'm just going to suck up a bit of that to try and reintroduce a jawline down there. And if I'm getting hard edges where I don't want them, I'm just soften it off with a brush like that. So I'm now dancing around with this brush, just trying to make things, just trying to introduce form really. Those nostrils are quite important. However, just putting those nostrils in there, this is still wet, so I can't get any sharp edges in. I've got to be careful, because what I'm doing is I'm still painting onto a wet surface, so it's still soft and it's not really defining anything. As soon as I paint with it, it's just disappearing. Right, let's get a bit more body work done. He's kind of dark around his shoulders, isn't he? And you know, I was talking about that highlight on his elbow. I've lost that. So let's try and reintroduce that by drinking off a bit of that. What I need to do is let this dry, and then I can start to carry on making some more hard edge definition. Let's see if we can, because this is all still wet, it's all just blending. That's separating a bit there. It's trying to soften things up around here. I want to keep that eyebrow in, but let's just try and remove some of these hard edges. Better. Now, I was talking earlier on about some colours in here. You know, he's got some interesting colours in this coat. I can see in here, you know, there's a little bit of purple in there. So I can just make a wash and splat some purple in, and just here and there, you know, a bit on the top of that thing there. It's a bit around his chin. It's probably a little bit of leftover kitty cat around there. Some blues, maybe a little bit of ultramarine, where the sky's glinting in his coat. There's some blue going on in there, I think. Actually, there's some purple and blue down here too. And I suppose if I made a wash and introduced that there, that's going to push the Payne's grey aside a bit. I think what I need to do as well, this front edge here, I'm tempted to get out my pencil here and just try and define this down here a little bit. I think that's just got a bit lost. I think that gives you a false edge down there. Which makes him look a bit lopsided. So I'm just going in with this pencil now. And maybe introducing a bit of action. And a few more details while this paint dries. I haven't got his blue nose on. It's got a lovely little blue. Well, it would be wet. Cats don't have wet noses, do they? But can you see that's quite bright on there? That is almost as bright as his eyes. So I'm just trying to lift off a bit of colour with my paintbrush like that. I didn't mix up a little bit of pale blue, a little bit of that cyan there. Not much, just to kind of, yeah. Let's just put a hint in there of blue. Now my pencil actually looks a bit grey, so I'm breaking out my pen and I'm just going to put in a bit of ink on these eyes, because very often I've found, you know, pencil doesn't actually cut the mustard. If you want a black, I mean, look at the difference there between that eye that I've inked in and the eye that's just pencil. The inked in eye has far more, it's a much deeper, darker value. It's more successful. So pencils are great, but so are pens. Ink, don't underestimate the power of ink. Sometimes you need a bit of black. So I'm coming in here with this ink and I'm picking out those eyes with that. Nice. And also try and balance up those pupils. Look, that pupil is much bigger than that pupil, so that it doesn't quite look quite right yet. So that needs a bit more weight. That's better. I could carry on with this pen, but I might regret it. So I'm going to put that away and I'm going to return to my pencil. This is one of those water-soluble pencils, they're good. Oh, and I'll tell you what else is good. I just brought one of these. I was showing my other class the other day. This is a blowtorch. Can you see that? Can you see the flame on there? I think it's like a chef's blowtorch for finishing creme brulees or whatever. But it's brilliant for drying off your watercolours. So I'm now just drying off. Yeah, I told you I wanted to maybe put a little bit of value in this back leg, but I was struggling to do so because it kept bleeding into there. Just dry it off with that. Now that's dry. I can actually say, right, you know what? That edge goes down there like that, his leg. That back leg lives down there. And I can do that. Well, actually, look, I didn't dry that bit and it's bled in. I did dry that bit and I've managed to retain a nice hard edge. So yeah, a little blowtorch if you're in that kind of mood. It's a nice thing to play with. Okay. It's all gone a bit messy. While this is still wet, I can still see the bit of work to do. His kind of top lips hang over his bottom jaw. So I'd like to try and make that apparent. His chin. His chin is behind his cheeks. So I want to try and make it disappear. Down here. So I'll put in a bit of shadow, but I want to soften the edges a bit. So wash off my brush, dry it a bit. See, I don't want a hard edge there. I want that softening. So that's better. I think on his chest, down underneath here. Pull a bit of that away. His whiskers, of course. His whiskers I'm going to put in, you know, these white old gentleman whiskers, they've got to go in. But of course, I don't want to do that while my paint's wet. Otherwise, I think, you know, I'll just, my white ink would be lost in the wash. So I'm going to let this dry and then I'm going to put the whiskers in. Unless maybe, might be worth just trying to suggest a whisker with a scratch. This is just the old credit card. That's rather nice, actually. Just a few little hairs like that. Yeah, it's giving it something. actually, while I've got the credit card out, it's quite nice to make a few marks in the wash. Everything's starting to dry off now, so things are less responsive. But I can still come in and make a few marks in this fur on the back, which is still wet, which is rather nice. Do you know, I don't know if you can see it, but a few little scratches in there. Don't do any harm at all. Right, I think that could be Benny. I think that could be him done. Just making a few last tweaks here and there. While there's still a bit of moisture in the paper, it gives me the opportunity to maybe just add a bit of shadow here and there. But down there, maybe Benny. As it dries off, I can start to paint in, use brush strokes to paint fur. I don't want to do too much of this because I rather like it when the watercolor does the work. I like it when you can't actually see the human hand in it. But anyway, I think that could be it. I think that could be done. What I might do when this is dry, and that's had a good old soaking, so that's going to take half an hour to dry off. When it is dry, I think I might get the nib pen out and a white ink and just put a few of these in. Although it doesn't need many, doesn't need much. But yeah, I think that's done. I think that's quite nice. I think that sums him up quite nicely. Okay, everybody. It was a bit different, wasn't it?
Thank you, Martin.
Thanks, Martin. It's really good.
Oh, was that quite interesting? Oh, sorry, everyone. It was. I enjoyed that. It's nice to not be too careful. It's nice to just let it happen. So yeah.
Interesting. Is he a grumpy cat?
No, he's lovely.
Oh.
Well, he's actually, I don't know him that well. I don't know him that well. He looks a bit grumpy, doesn't he?
But he's old, so.
Well, yeah, exactly. Good point.
It was a lovely tutorial.
Thank you very much. Go off and enjoy the weather, and I will catch you next week.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks,
Thank
Martin.
you. Take care.
All right, everybody.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.